To our amazing viewers at Midnight Affairs Tales, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know now. Let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. To Daniel, the groom, he said, raising his glass. Gone too soon, but never forgotten. The reception hall erupted with applause. Some laughed, some cried, some clinked glasses and murmured, "Amen," under their breath. Problem was, Daniel Shaw wasn't dead. He was sitting in a black rental car, engine off, 10 yards from the back exit of the hall. One hand on the door handle, the other clutching a warrant. Not a wedding invitation. A federal arrest warrant. Raindrops rolled down the windshield like sweat. The kind of steady, soaking rain that drowns everything in silence. Through the tinted glass, he could see the silhouettes of people dancing, hugging, sipping from gold-rimmed champagne flutes. He didn't need to see the groom's face. He knew the voice. That same smug baritone he'd trusted for 20 years. His best man. His best friend. The man who'd given the toast at Daniel's first wedding. Ethan Carr. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the controlled effort of not walking in there and snapping Ethan's jaw in front of the whole damn room. Instead, he waited. A black SUV rolled up beside him. The window came down halfway. "You sure about this?" asked Agent Layla Grant, calm and sharp behind the wheel. Daniel turned his face toward the reception hall, rain tracing his reflection in the window. "They buried me without a body. Now they get to see the ghost." Layla nodded. She respected him, not as a victim, but as a man who'd refused to stay one. 7 months earlier, Daniel Shaw was a name on a missing persons report. The official story: he went out on his boat alone on Lake Briar for a late-night cruise. His wife, Claire, said he'd done it before. Needed time to clear his head. The weather turned rough. They found the wreckage. No body. Presumed dead. End of story. Except it wasn't. Because Daniel didn't drown. He didn't crash. And he sure as hell didn't go out there alone. He remembered the impact. The hiss of gas. The faint burn in his nostrils before the explosion. And a figure, blurry, tall, stepping off the boat seconds before the blast. A face he couldn't see through the smoke and blood. He woke up 2 days later, wrapped in gauze and barely breathing, in a cabin in the woods owned by an old retired firefighter named Conrad. The man said he'd found Daniel washed up on the shore, unconscious. Didn't trust hospitals. Kept him alive. It took 3 weeks for Daniel to fully speak again. 5 more before he could walk without assistance. And on the 6th week, he saw the wedding announcement online. Claire and Ethan. 2 hearts find healing. Set for March 18th. Exactly 7 months after the day Daniel died. He didn't rage. Not yet. He studied. He traced the insurance payout for $0.8 million. Fast-tracked. He checked Claire's text from the backup on their shared cloud account. One message to Ethan a week before that accident. "It has to look real. You promised." And then, finally, he saw the real twist, a signature. Ethan's name, not just his best man, but his business partner. Claire had transferred Daniel's stake in his company to Ethan. 3 weeks after the funeral. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a heist. And Daniel Shaw was done being dead. Back in the car, Daniel passed the warrant to Layla. She scanned it one last time before tucking it into her blazer. "Once you walk in, there's no undoing this," she said. "You sure you don't want us to serve him privately?" "No," Daniel said, his voice calm, iron-thin. "He wanted an audience. So let's give him one." She cracked the door. "You take the left side. I'll come through the main entrance." Daniel stepped out into the rain, letting it soak through his blazer. He didn't rush. He walked like a man heading into his own funeral, uninvited, and carrying a resurrection in his back pocket. He moved around the side of the hall, past a valet talking into his radio, past a row of parked Teslas and Bentleys. The reception hall glowed gold and soft from the inside. Jazz played low. He stepped through the side door and walked straight in. The first person to notice him was a server. The man blinked twice and nearly dropped his tray. Then a woman gasped. Then someone screamed. Then silence. Ethan stood at the head table, champagne glass frozen at his lips. Claire turned slowly, the smile still frozen on her face. And Daniel just stood there, dripping rainwater on the polished marble floor, dressed in the same black suit they'd buried him in. He looked Ethan in the eye. "Miss me?" Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Layla stepped in from the front entrance, badge up. "Ethan Carr, you're under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and criminal conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." The words echoed across the stunned silence. Claire dropped her glass. "And Daniel?" He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just stood still, watching the empire they built on his grave begin to collapse. Later, when they cuffed Ethan and let him past Daniel, he spat. "You were supposed to die." Daniel leaned in, quiet and close. "So were you." And then Ethan was gone, stuffed into a cruiser under flashing red and blue light, the rain finally letting up. Claire stood at the door, pale and shaking. She reached for Daniel's arm. "I didn't," he pulled back. "You rehearsed my eulogy, Claire, while I was breathing through a tube." She didn't cry. Not this time. Daniel turned and walked away without looking back. But this wasn't over. This was just the reveal. The wedding toast had exposed the surface. Now came the digging. The financials. The offshore accounts. The recorded phone calls. Now came the part where Daniel Shaw, dead man, betrayed husband, ruined CEO, would use every tool he had to not just expose what they'd done, but dismantle the life they built from his ashes. They thought Daniel Shaw was dead, but dead men don't hire forensic accountants. Dead men don't break into storage units under fake names. And dead men sure as hell don't subpoena call records from the shadows. The night Ethan Carr was arrested at his own wedding was just the explosion. The fuse had been burning for months. 8 weeks before the wedding, Daniel stood in front of a rusted metal door in South Carolina, holding a bolt cutter and a deep breath. The lock snapped clean. Inside the unit were 6 black storage tubs, a file cabinet, and a fireproof safe. All of it left behind by Daniel under his original company name, Shaw Maritime Solutions, before Ethan quietly scrubbed him from every contract and replaced him on every title. Daniel flipped open the first tub. Photos, emails, phone logs, handwritten notes from his father, now deceased, about proprietary boat engine tech they developed together. Ethan and Claire had stolen that, too. Branded it under a shell company, Carnova Systems. Patent pending. But it wasn't just about theft. It was about erasure. Daniel realized then they hadn't just tried to kill him. They tried to delete him. That's when he stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a ghost with a blueprint. Back in the cabin with Conrad, his silent guardian, Daniel set up a base of operations. 1 laptop, 1 corkboard, 2 burner phones. No internet registered under his name. No traceable accounts. Just smoke, mirrors, and data. He started digging. Claire's texts to Ethan had already told part of the story. They'd been involved before the explosion. Maybe long before. But Daniel wanted proof, cold, clinical, undeniable. So he started tracking payments. Claire had received 3 separate transfers from Dover Maritime Trust, an account connected to Daniel's old company. But the signatures didn't match hers. They matched a man named Preston Miles, a name Daniel hadn't heard in 5 years. Preston was a crooked maritime lawyer who once helped Daniel dodge a lawsuit from an angry contractor. Daniel cut ties with him after finding out he was funneling minor profits offshore. So why was Preston back? And why was he the one signing checks to Claire after Daniel's death? Daniel took a trip. Charleston, South Carolina, 3:12 p.m. Daniel walked into Preston Miles' office with a baseball cap low on his brow and a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. The receptionist glanced up, then did a double take. "I'm here for Preston," Daniel said flatly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see me." She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Within minutes, Daniel was in Preston's office. Glass walls, polished floors. A mounted marlin above his desk, still tagged with a tournament ribbon. Preston entered from the side door, paused mid-step, then turned white. "Jesus, you're supposed to be dead," Daniel offered. He opened the briefcase. Inside, 3 manila folders. One had bank records. One had property deeds with Claire's forged initials. One had a USB drive. "Sit down," Daniel said. "You're going to tell me how long you've been laundering my life." Preston sank into his leather chair, sweat already forming above his brow. "Look, man, I didn't know. I thought it was legit. Ethan said you were out, that you'd cashed out and left everything behind." "Why would I cash out my wife, my patents, and my name?" "I figured, midlife crisis?" Daniel didn't blink. He leaned in. "I'm giving you one chance, Preston. You either tell me everything now, or the feds will ask you later." Preston caved. It all started 4 months before the explosion. Ethan approached him about setting up offshore accounts and rerouting Daniel's stake in Shaw Maritime through silent entities. He claimed Daniel was planning to disappear, to fake a death, start a new life, and leave everything behind. That was the story Preston believed until the life insurance hit. And by then, he was too deep. Back at the cabin, Daniel added Preston's confession to the ghost files. The files were growing, a digital kill switch of sorts. Organized evidence of every thread Ethan and Claire had tried to cover. But Daniel didn't want to just prove betrayal. He wanted to unmake them from the inside. That meant going after the engine patent. And for that, he needed someone inside Carnova. So he found Ellie Tran. Ellie was Ethan's executive assistant. Smart, underpaid, overworked, and overlooked. She was also the daughter of Daniel's late mentor, Charles Tran, an engineer who'd helped build the prototype Daniel and his father once developed. Daniel reached out using an anonymous encrypted email, attaching old blueprints only Charles and Daniel had ever seen. He signed it, "I'm not dead, and neither is the truth." She replied 2 hours later with a burner number. They met at a gas station off Highway 71. Ellie climbed into his car and stared at him like she was seeing a ghost. "I knew it," she whispered. "Ethan said you drowned. But I saw the patents coming a week later with Claire's name." Daniel nodded. "I need access. Meeting logs. Development notes. Anything that proves they stole what I built." "I can do better than that," she said, pulling out a flash drive. "Ethan made me record all the team calls. Said he wanted everything documented for legal purposes." "Paranoia," Daniel muttered. "Or guilt," Ellie replied. They shook hands. From that moment, Ellie was in. And Ethan had a leak. 5 weeks before the wedding, Daniel watched from a hotel rooftop across the street as Claire and Ethan toured the event venue. They looked happy, relaxed, planning centerpieces and floral arrangements. Daniel clicked a button on his phone. A voice recording played through his earpiece. "Ethan, once we lock down the patent, sell Carnova to Helix Global for 8 figures. Claire keeps half. I vanish into consulting. Easy." Claire and Daniel. "Ethan, he's already gone." Claire, "Good. I couldn't fake the crying much longer." Daniel stopped the recording. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just logged the file under Exhibit C, premeditation. 3 weeks before the wedding, Agent Layla Grant called him. She'd been following the insurance case quietly, suspicious from day one. "I was expecting a corpse, not a callback," she said when he first reached out. "You've got both," Daniel replied. "Corpse on paper. Callback in person." They met. He gave her the ghost files. She opened the folders one by one. Listened to the recordings. Watched the video Ellie captured of Ethan mocking Daniel's accident during a team meeting. And then she looked up. "I can't promise a conviction, but I can promise a takedown." "Good," Daniel said. "Because I'm not looking for revenge." She raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm looking for restoration. You burn a man's name, you don't get to keep the ashes." 2 weeks before the wedding, Daniel secured the warrant. 1 week before, Ellie leaked the patent history to a whistleblower blog. 3 days before, Daniel visited his father's grave and laid down a business card. "Shaw Maritime. Reinstated." He whispered, "They tried to steal your legacy. I'm taking it back." And then, it was time. The suit was pressed. The files were backed up to 7 locations. The plan was airtight. All that remained was the stage, the toast, the return, and the fall. Now, after the arrest, the silence was just beginning to echo. Ethan was booked. Claire was questioned. Carnova's board had gone into emergency lockdown. But Daniel wasn't done. The wedding had ended the first act. Now came the reckoning. The world still believed in the lie, some of it, anyway. But Daniel had more ghosts to drag into daylight, starting with the money and ending with Claire. 3 days after the wedding takedown, Claire Carr, formerly Claire Shaw, stood alone in the marble foyer of her $500,000 home, barefoot, arms crossed, staring at the door. The air buzzed with silence, the kind that only comes when something big just fell and something bigger is coming next. She hadn't slept since Ethan's arrest, not because she missed him, because she knew it was only a matter of time before Daniel came for her. He didn't need to knock. She came home to find a manila envelope on her doorstep. No address, no return label, just her name, written in the exact cursive she used to sign her wedding vows the first time. Inside, 3 printed screenshots. Her bank records, showing $4.8 million in transfers from Shaw Maritime Insurance. A notarized statement of her stake in Carnova, signed a week after Daniel's death. A photo of her and Ethan at a beach house in Mexico, dated 3 months before the accident. On the back, one line, lie to them. I dare you. She dropped the envelope like it burned. Daniel didn't wait for her to panic. He was already in Atlanta, sitting in a quiet corner of a bar across from Carnova's head of finance, Reed Lawton. Reed looked exhausted. His tie was loose, his laptop open. You're not even going to pretend to be dead anymore, he said dryly. Why fake it when I can haunt them better alive? Daniel replied. Reed slid over a USB. Everything from the last fiscal year. Ethan authorized 2 sets of books. One for the board, one for the buyer. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Buyer. Helix Global. They were planning to sell Carnova next quarter for $110 million. Quiet deal. Ethan and Claire would have walked away with 40 plus. Daniel leaned back. So they cashed me out. Sold the body. Split the bones. You could say that. He took the USB. You know, Reed, Daniel said, standing, you don't look like a criminal. I'm not, Reed said. I'm just tired of covering for them. Daniel nodded once. You just helped kill a company that buried me alive. That counts for something. The next day, Carnova's buyer, Helix Global, received an anonymous packet. Inside, a detailed financial breakdown of the company's fraudulent books, voice recordings of Ethan's patent theft plans, and an internal memo with Claire's name at the bottom, approving a silent investor with an offshore Cayman account. The deal was frozen in less than 24 hours. Carnova's stock, already private, dropped its internal value by 40%. 2 board members resigned. Claire tried to hold a press conference, but was advised not to speak. Daniel made sure of it. He'd sent her attorney a second envelope. This one contained an unfiled indictment draft prepared by Layla Grant's office. It named Claire as a co-conspirator to financial fraud and insurance deception. It wasn't official yet, but it was close enough to break her silence. Meanwhile, Daniel returned to the lake, to the scene of the crime. He stood at the edge of the dock where the boat exploded 7 months ago, the scars on his right arm still faint but permanent. He held up a GoPro, one Ellie had recovered from a project file inside Carnova. It had footage they never deleted. Claire walking up to the boat with Ethan. Their voices captured from behind the docked vessel. Ethan, he won't feel a thing. The gas knocks him out before the flames hit. Claire, and if he wakes up? Ethan, he won't. You said he took the sleeping pills. Claire, I told him they were melatonin. Daniel stared at the water and hit upload. The video went live on a private link. Layla would use it later, in court. But Daniel had something else planned first. He wasn't just aiming for prison. He was aiming for public memory. 1 week later, a clip surfaced on an anonymous Twitter account. It showed the wedding footage, Ethan raising a glass, giving the toast. Then it cut to Daniel standing at the side door, alive. Then it cut again, this time to the dock footage. The betrayal. The setup. And finally, the title card. He was supposed to be dead. Now he wants answers. By midnight, it had 2.3 million views. By morning, it was national. Claire's law firm dropped her. Carnova's offices were surrounded by press. And Daniel? He was back at the cabin, sipping coffee with Conrad, watching it unfold on a cracked iPad. "You're not just haunting them anymore," Conrad muttered. "You're burying them." Daniel gave a half-smile. "I'm not done digging. The last piece wasn't legal. It was personal." Claire had filed paperwork, backdated, to claim full ownership of Daniel's patents, the very tech his father died helping him build. If those documents held, even prison wouldn't touch what she stood to make long-term. But Daniel knew something Claire didn't. His father had embedded a physical failsafe inside every prototype, a tiny internal chip signature, unique to Daniel's engineering ID. Only 2 people in the world knew that. One was dead. The other was sitting across from the patent board, testifying under oath. Daniel presented the prototype chip, the engineering specs, and the registration ledger, never digitized, never tampered with. By the end of the hearing, the board voted unanimously. Patent reinstated to Daniel Shaw. All Carnova claims revoked. And just like that, her empire wasn't just broken. It was stripped. Daniel stepped outside to find Claire waiting by the curb. Her face hollow. Mascara streaked. Dress wrinkled. No cameras. No ring. "You got what you wanted," she said. Daniel looked past her, toward the sun setting behind the courthouse. "No," he said. "I got back what was mine." She swallowed hard. "Why not finish it, then?" "Press charges. Bury me." He paused, then stepped closer. "You faked tears at my funeral," he said quietly, "and lied to the only man who ever protected you." "I loved you," she hissed, eyes watering. "No," Daniel said, voice cold and sharp. "You loved what I gave you. Until it got inconvenient." He walked away. She didn't follow. That night, Daniel updated the ghost files one last time. He archived every folder, every voice memo, every court record, then uploaded a full timeline of the events, undated, untitled, anonymous, on a private website labeled simply, "After Death, the Daniel Shaw Case." Layla called the next morning. "You ready to make it official?" she asked. "I already did," he said. "Public always remembers the headlines. The court? That's just cleanup." She laughed, then paused. "There's one more thing, Daniel." Claire's lawyer filed a motion claiming psychological duress. "She's trying to negotiate a plea." Daniel didn't hesitate. "No deals," he said. "Let her explain it all. On record." And that was the end of Claire Carr. Her name would live on only in public transcripts and Google searches. Not as a wife, not as a CEO, not even as a traitor. Just a woman who married a dead man, then watched him come back and take everything she stole. The first Carnova office to close was the Savannah branch. It started with 1 board member resigning, then 2 more. Then the auditors came. By the end of the week, the building was empty. Lights off. Phones dead. Logo stripped from the wall. Daniel watched the footage online, a local news drone hovering over the office as boxes were carried out. Due to recent investigations, the anchor said, Carnova Systems has officially paused operations across all southeastern locations. Paused was a polite word. Carnova wasn't on pause. It was rotting from the inside. Exactly as planned. Daniel had moved out of the cabin. He didn't go home. There was nothing to return to. Instead, he rented a small space in the city under an alias and converted it into a war room. Monitors lined the back wall. A whiteboard was filled with names, accounts, and deadlines. He wasn't just hunting anymore. He was reconstructing the narrative. Daniel knew the press would chase scandal until they lost interest. That wasn't enough. He wanted permanence. Not a headline. A legacy. So he called in the one person who knew how to make stories immortal. Rachel Bexley was a documentary filmmaker with a reputation for ripping open lies. She'd exposed city officials, burned pharmaceutical companies to the ground. And 3 years ago, she did a deep dive on whistleblower corruption that won her a Peabody. Daniel found her outside a courthouse in Boston. He didn't use his real name, just handed her a tablet. On it, footage of the dock, the patent trail, Ethan's offshore deposits, Claire's voice on tape, mocking the eulogy he waited. She watched in silence. When she looked up, her voice was calm, dead serious. "This isn't a story," she said. "It's a weapon." Daniel nodded. "I want people to remember it." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "Why me?" "Because you don't flinch," he said. And you don't settle. She took the tablet. Then, slowly, one condition. Name it. You don't get to edit. You don't get to rewrite. I tell the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make you look bad. Daniel gave her a hard look, then nodded once. Deal. The first teaser dropped 2 weeks later. A simple black screen. Then a voiceover, Rachel's, steady and cold. He was the man they buried. The man whose company made millions. Whose wife remarried. Whose best friend toasted his death. But ghosts don't stay buried. And this one brought receipts. Then, after death, the Daniel Shaw files streaming this fall, the internet exploded. Reddit lit up. Threads dissected every piece of footage. True crime YouTubers uploaded theories within hours. And Claire's name trended for 3 days straight, with the word monster attached to half the tags. But Daniel didn't care about trending. He was building momentum for something bigger. Layla called again. Carnova's investors are lawyering up. SEC wants to talk. You ready for a deposition? I'll testify, Daniel said. But first, I want one last face-to-face. With who? Gavin Shaw. Layla paused. Your brother. Yeah, Daniel said, jaw tight. He's the one who handed Ethan the internal files. Daniel hadn't spoken to Gavin since the accident. They weren't close before it, but after the explosion, Gavin didn't just mourn, he took control of Shaw Maritime's remaining stake and sold it, quietly, to Ethan. When Daniel traced the transaction, he saw the signatures, saw the email threads. Gavin had known Ethan was going to sell it off. He hadn't planned the murder, but he'd enabled it for money. So Daniel invited him to lunch. Neutral ground. A rooftop cafe. No cameras. No lawyers. Just blood. Gavin showed up wearing sunglasses and guilt. He sat across from Daniel like a man waiting to be slapped. You look good, he said. For a dead man. You look rich, Daniel said. For a brother. Gavin sighed. Look, Ethan said you were planning to disappear. That you wanted out. You'd gone dark before. How was I supposed to know? You didn't ask, Daniel cut in. You just signed the damn papers. Gavin looked away. I thought maybe you were tired. Running. Hell, Claire seemed heartbroken. Daniel's hand hit the table hard. Heartbroken? He hissed. She was picking centerpieces with the guy who tried to burn me alive. Gavin swallowed. Silence stretched. Then Daniel pulled a document from his coat. I'm not pressing charges, he said. You were stupid, not criminal. Gavin blinked. But I'm taking back every share you sold, Daniel continued. Every cent you made off my name donated. Under Dad's foundation. He slid the paper across the table. You signed this, Daniel said. And we never speak again. Gavin hesitated, then signed, and walked away without looking back. With Gavin's portion gone, Daniel now owned 100% of the remaining Shaw Maritime patent. He restored the name, cleaned the books, and transferred the intellectual rights to a nonprofit research firm. He wouldn't make a dime from it, but neither would anyone else. That was the difference between vengeance and justice. Vengeance wants to see someone suffer. Justice wants to see truth survive. Daniel had chosen truth, and it was almost time to bury the past. Rachel finished editing the full documentary 3 weeks later. She sent Daniel the final cut, per their deal. He watched it alone. The opening scene was his wedding. Claire in white. Ethan smiling behind him. Then came the flames. The gas. The wreckage. Then, Daniel's face, burned and bandaged in a mirror. Then, his first words on camera. They said I died. But I survived the part that mattered. My name. The last scene was a split screen. Claire in court. Daniel on the lake. Silence. Then fade to black. Daniel closed the laptop and exhaled. It was done. The day the documentary dropped, Ethan was officially indicted on 7 felony charges. Claire was named in 2. Federal court loomed. But Daniel didn't go. He didn't need to. The world knew. The footage was viral. The headlines brutal. Claire's reputation, scorched. Ethan's future, over. And Daniel? He went home. Not to the old house. To a small lakeside cabin of his own. Built by hand. Quiet. Clean. He kept no pictures inside. Only one plaque above the fireplace. It read, Shaw Maritime was built by truth, not by thieves. And every so often, when the wind blew just right, he'd take out the final piece of the ghost files. The last image. The wedding photo. Ethan, Claire, and a glass raised to a man they thought they'd erased. Daniel stared at it one last time, then tossed it into the fire, and walked out into the night. Alive, free, and no longer haunted. It had been 3 weeks since the documentary dropped. 3 weeks since Ethan pled not guilty. 3 weeks since Claire fired her 4th attorney. And 3 weeks of Daniel Shaw failing to breathe in peace. He should have felt done, but peace wasn't coming. Something felt off, not unfinished, unanswered. Daniel stood in the shed behind his cabin, flipping through old schematics. His father's original notes kept in a locked crate. The handwriting was steady, each page dated, diagrammed, signed. The last one had a different signature. Daniel stared at it. It wasn't his father's, and it wasn't his. It was labeled Project Seaglass, Rev 2.0. The engine plans were modified, blueprints of a more advanced design, one Daniel had never seen, one he never built. And at the bottom was a printed footer, property of Novatech Energy Systems. He didn't recognize the name, but the registration date was 3 weeks after his death. Daniel rushed back to his work table and powered up the secured laptop. He traced the Novatech filing, buried deep in a Delaware holding shell, filed by a company called Darrow and Vale Technical Group. That name rang a bell. It wasn't from his world. It was from Ethan's. Ethan's consulting phase. The job he said he'd take after selling Carnova. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He pulled up a list of silent investors from the Carnova files Ellie had leaked earlier. There it was. Bottom row. Marcus Vale. Daniel froze. Because Marcus Vale wasn't just a financier. He was Ethan's uncle, and he ran one of the largest private defense contractors in the Southeast. Ethan hadn't just stolen Daniel's patent. He sold an advanced version to someone bigger, someone who wasn't in court, wasn't on tape, wasn't on the radar, someone who had always stayed in the shadows. And the worst part? Claire never mentioned it, which meant she might not have even known. The wedding was personal, the betrayal intimate. But this was systemic. Daniel stared at the screen. He wasn't finished. He'd been played again, by someone with real power. Layla called that night. "I thought you were done," she said. "I thought so too," Daniel replied. "But there's a second engine." A pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone upgraded my design and sold it to a military vendor. Under a fake company. Under my name." Layla exhaled. "This just became federal." "It already was." "No," she said. "Now it's defense contracts. National security. This isn't just revenge anymore, Daniel. This is classified." Daniel leaned back. Then, coldly, "Good. Let's classify it as treason." The next morning, Daniel drove 6 hours south, to a compound hidden off the Georgia coast. It looked like a resort: gates, guards, glass. But the sign on the door said, Darrow and Vale Innovation Labs. He used a fake name to get through the first checkpoint. He used truth to get through the second. He handed the receptionist a printed schematic. It was the Seaglass engine, the original, with his father's signature on it. The receptionist paled and made a call. 15 minutes later, Daniel was face to face with Marcus Vale. Marcus looked like power. Slick, clean, calm. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses. "I expected this day," he said. Daniel didn't sit. "You upgraded my engine. I improved it. You stole it." Marcus smirked. "No, Ethan did that. I just bought the rights. Paid well for them, too. You knew I was alive." "I suspected," Marcus shrugged. "Didn't matter. I owned the paperwork." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You think this ends with paperwork?" "I think it ends," Marcus said, "when you understand something very simple." He stood, walked slowly over. "You can ruin people, Daniel. Ethan, Claire, whoever. But you come after me, you start a war. I have lobbyists, judges, half the Navy testing my prototype as we speak. You're bluffing." Marcus leaned in. "No, I'm bidding. Helix Global was the small play. You just never saw the real one." Daniel stared at him. The wedding had been a smokescreen. The company? Collateral. The real prize was always sea glass. And Marcus had played them all. Daniel left without speaking another word. Back at the cabin, he tore apart every note his father ever wrote, trying to find anything undocumented, unstolen, unreproducible. And then he found it. One sheet. Old. Water-stained. Half-crumpled in a folder marked DNR. It wasn't a design. It was a recording code. A failsafe hidden inside the Seaglass system's CPU. A data trace meant to track internal temperature shifts for safety. Harmless on paper. But if installed, it recorded all input-output logs. Meaning, every test, every location, every user. And maybe, just maybe, a breadcrumb trail leading back to Marcus Vale himself. Daniel took the paper, scanned it, and sent it to Layla. I might have a way to break him, he said. If this trace exists, she replied, we're not just talking lawsuits. We're talking congressional hearings. Daniel nodded. Then let's make it public. Rachel was already in the middle of planning a follow-up special. She called it After Death, the Machine. Daniel sent her the failsafe file and the back-channel Seaglass notes. Told her what Marcus said. She listened. Then said, this isn't a sequel. This is a war film. Then tell the world what it costs to fake a man's grave and sell his soul. 3 days later, the failsafe triggered. An anonymous server, set up months ago, quietly tied to the original prototype, pinged Layla's office with a location, Naval Testing Range 7, Florida Keys. The engine was active, and it had Daniel's original ID signature in the code. Proof. They hadn't just stolen his work. They'd used it, and pretended it was theirs. That was all Daniel needed. Layla filed an injunction. The Navy froze the test. And Marcus Vale, Kingmaker, Ghost Investor, was now under a Senate review panel. Just like that. The man who pulled the strings had his strings cut. And Daniel Shaw, the man they tried to erase, was now listed on the patent again. This time not as inventor, but as whistleblower. Late that night, Daniel stood by the lake again. No fire. No press. No plan. Just peace. Real this time. The second engine had almost buried him again. But he'd stayed ahead. And this time, he hadn't just restored his life. He'd burned down the entire system that fed on men like him. Tomorrow, there'd be news coverage. Subpoenas. Maybe even cameras outside the cabin. But tonight, there was only wind. Water. And the quiet realization that Daniel Shaw hadn't just won. He'd rewritten the ending. They told Daniel to wear a suit. He wore the same one they buried him in. No tie. Black on black. Clean, sharp, silent. He didn't come to impress the Senate Oversight Committee. He came to remind them what happens when ghosts speak. The courtroom was half press, half politics. A dozen microphones. 2 cameras. And a row of polished shoes under a long mahogany table. The hearing was titled, Unregulated Technology Transfer in the Case of Novatech Seaglass. But everyone knew what it really was. The day Marcus Vale answered for a dead man's work. Rachel watched from the back row, arms crossed. Layla sat to Daniel's left, quietly nodding as the chairwoman, Senator Briggs, called his name. Mr. Shaw, thank you for appearing. Daniel leaned into the mic calm. Measured. I didn't appear, he said. I returned. A few reporters scribbled faster. The senators leaned in. And Daniel began. He told the story from the start. The betrayal. The boat. The recordings. Then he walked them through the schematics. How the Seaglass engine wasn't just his, but how the hidden signature proved its origin. Then he dropped the first real bomb. He handed over a flash drive with metadata from the test logs, pulled from the failsafe. Each log showed the prototype being tested by Novatech, using equipment sourced through Darrow and Vale's military contract, 5 weeks after his declared death. Layla followed it with the receipts. The room shifted. The air thickened. Senator Briggs looked down the table at the Department of Defense rep, who'd been quiet all morning. Did you know this engine was originally tied to an unresolved death? He fumbled. We were led to believe the rights were clean. Daniel didn't flinch. Clean, he said. They washed it in blood and called it clean. The silence said enough. And then, Just when the session was winding down, someone entered the room. Tall, female, mid-40s, business jacket, confident stride. Daniel turned slightly. It was Ellie Tran, and she wasn't smiling. The moment the committee called for a recess, Daniel approached her. "What are you doing here?" he asked. She held up a court badge. "Subpoenaed." "For what?" "I didn't know until this morning." He stared at her. "You gave me everything." She looked ashamed. "I thought I did." Daniel's jaw locked. "What didn't you tell me?" She hesitated, looked at the floor. Then, "The second engine? The one Marcus filed?" "I was listed on the witness documents because I signed off on one of the first builds." "What?" Daniel blinked. "I didn't know it was yours at the time," she said quickly. "Ethan said it was experimental tech from a retired partner, some closed patent. I only saw the raw diagrams. I logged it for testing. That's it. I swear." Daniel felt the walls tilt slightly. "You were in the room." "I didn't know it was yours," she repeated. "I thought you were dead." That line again. That excuse. "You should have asked." "I trusted them," she whispered. "Just like you did." Daniel stepped back. The camera crews moved in, sensing tension. He walked away without saying another word. Later that evening, Layla called him from her office. "We're prepping a new angle." "What now?" She hesitated. "Perjury. For Ellie." She signed a compliance form certifying originality of the Sea-Glass test engine. "That's felony territory, Daniel." "She didn't steal it." "No, but she helped them use it. Even if she didn't know." Daniel rubbed his forehead. She came forward. "She gave me everything. And it won't matter in court." Daniel's voice hardened. "Then make it matter." Layla exhaled. "I'll try. But this isn't your backyard anymore. This is federal. Blood doesn't matter here. Only proof." That night, Daniel stood outside Rachel's studio in Atlanta. She was in the edit bay, working late. He sat down beside her. She showed him a new scene, Ellie, in old footage, laughing at a whiteboard during a Carnova development meeting. "This doesn't help her," Rachel said. "She was manipulated," Daniel said. She still signed the form. They sat in silence. Then Rachel turned to him. "Why do you care?" Daniel looked at the paused frame of Ellie's face on screen. Then quietly, "Because I didn't survive to destroy people who didn't know what they were building." Rachel gave a small nod. "I'll cut her segment." "No," Daniel said. "Leave it. But give her voice too." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "She made a mistake." "So did I. But she didn't put me on that boat." The next morning, Marcus Vail finally broke. Under pressure from the hearing, from public exposure, and from his own shareholders, he offered to settle. He would publicly concede Daniel's ownership of the engine, pay restitution, withdraw from all current military bids. And he wanted it quiet. No further testimony. No charges. A sealed agreement. Daniel declined. And then he released a statement. "You don't get to bury people with paperwork and walk away. I was worth more dead than alive to men like Marcus Vail. Now I want every person who covered it up to explain, on record, why they called theft innovation." The settlement crumbled. The hearings resumed. And this time, Marcus had to testify. In public. Under oath. Ellie was never charged. Layla negotiated a deferred immunity clause based on early cooperation and whistleblower aid. But Daniel never saw her again. She disappeared from the city, changed her number, deleted her socials. And that was fine. Some people are chapters, not endings. The final hearing ended on a cold Thursday morning. Daniel stood on the Capitol steps as the press swarmed. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. "What happens now?" one reporter shouted. Daniel paused, then said, simply, "They call me dead. I just made sure the world remembers who wrote the story." He walked down the steps alone. And this time, there was no revenge left in him. Only truth. And the weight of finally being heard. Marcus Vail didn't walk out the front doors of the Capitol. He left through the back, surrounded by lawyers, agents, and silence. His empire didn't fall overnight, but it cracked. The next morning, 3 contracts were terminated. The Department of Defense froze all joint R&D deals with Darrow and Vail. The Pentagon issued a vague but firm statement. Sea-glass technology is under review pending origin verification and ethical compliance. Translated, they got caught. Now they're pretending to care. Daniel didn't celebrate. He went home, to the cabin. The original one, Conrad's. He hadn't spoken to the old man in weeks, not since the hearing started. He found him on the back porch, gutting fish with a clean blade and a cigarette. "You finally done screaming?" Conrad asked. Daniel sat down next to him. "I think I'm done being buried." Big difference. Silence. Then Conrad said, "You pulled the rod out, son. Doesn't mean the world's clean. Just means you made noise loud enough someone else has to sweep it." Daniel stared out at the trees. What if someone wants to silence it again? Conrad flicked his cigarette into the dirt. "Then you be louder." The next day, Daniel received a letter. No sender. No return address. Just a government seal. Inside, a formal invitation. Department of Energy. Washington, D.C. Private R&D Collaboration Discussion. Daniel frowned. He didn't trust it. But he went anyway. Because silence doesn't keep ghosts at bay, truth does. He was met in a steel elevator by a woman in a gray blazer and government badge. No name given. They rode down. 3 floors underground. Concrete. Soundproof. Inside the meeting room, 3 men sat at a long table. 1 woman. All of them watching him closely. No names. No cards. The woman finally spoke. "We know what you exposed." Daniel stayed quiet. She continued, "You burned Marcus Vale in daylight. That took guts. And intelligence. Not many men build a legacy and claw it back from a coffin." Still no response. Then she leaned forward. "We're not here to praise you." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "We're here because you made enemies. Real ones. Not Ethan and Claire. Men who don't do press conferences. Who don't sue. They erase." Daniel gave a small nod. "And what? You want to protect me?" "No," she said plainly. "We want you to keep burning them. But this time with us." He laughed once. "Cold. You want me to work for you?" "Not work," she said. "Build. Show us how deep this goes. We're forming a private task group. Your intel, your access, your tools. Legal autonomy. Black budget. You lead it." Daniel stood. Shook his head. "You buried me once. Now you want to give me a shovel." The room stayed still. "We want to give you justice, Mr. Shaw." Scaled. He left without answering. And when he got outside, the wind was colder than he remembered. He'd won his war. But the battlefield was still active. 3 days later, Rachel's follow-up documentary After Death, The Machine dropped. It blew the internet apart. News anchors called Daniel the man who outran corruption. Subreddits lit up with theories. Hashtag the ghost built it trended for 2 days. And in the middle of it all, an email. Anonymous sender. No signature. 1 attachment. Subject: "You missed one." Daniel opened the file. It was a transaction log. Offshore. Dated 2 months before his accident. $2.5 million transferred into an account under the name Julian Carr, Ethan's father. Dead for 10 years. Except that account was still active. Daniel took the file to Layla. She ran the routing code. 3 hours later, she called. "It's real. What does it fund?" "It's not just Ethan's father," she said. "That account is linked to a cluster. 11 total. Each one tied to former military supply chain execs. Offshore trusts. Tech firms. One even traced back to your company before the patent was ever filed." Daniel's chest tightened. This wasn't just a betrayal, she said. This was a pipeline. Daniel sat down slowly. They didn't kill him for the money. They killed him because he was in the way. He wasn't just a casualty of greed. He was an interruption. And the pipeline was still active. He went back to the cabin, stared at the fire, and for the first time since the wedding, he wasn't angry. He was ready. There would be no more grave, no more revenge, just a decision: keep burning or walk away. The knock on the door came just before midnight. Daniel opened it slowly. A black SUV idled in the trees. Out stepped a woman, same gray blazer, same badge. "We need your answer," she said. Daniel looked past her, to the trees, to the lake, then back at her. "Give me access. Full data. No leash. You'll have it. And I choose my targets. We'll clear them. He paused. Then tell your committee. He stepped outside, put on his coat, and closed the cabin door behind him. I'm not building weapons. She raised an eyebrow. Then what are you building? Daniel stared into the dark. Closure. The black badge gave Daniel access to places most people didn't know existed. He didn't ask how the task force was funded, or who signed the budget. He just said one thing. I want names. The ones behind the signatures. Behind the money. Behind the kill order. And they delivered. Not all at once. Not clearly. But the files started coming. Encrypted. Cross-referenced. Obscured with code names and shell core. Layla didn't have clearance to help. Rachel didn't have access to the system. Daniel was alone again, but this time by choice. He wasn't just chasing ghosts. He was becoming one. The cluster of accounts tied to Julian Carr unraveled into a network of silent investors dating back a decade. Each one linked to defense startups, maritime patents, and advanced propulsion systems. At the top of the web, buried under 3 layers of holding companies, was one firm, Carl Strategies. Publicly, it was a consulting group for overseas logistics. Privately, it was something else. Daniel dug deeper. He found one name listed as Strategic Director. Warren J. Bancroft, retired admiral, former Naval Acquisition Director, and head of a secretive military-industrial advisory council that, until now, existed only in whispers. This was it. The real architect. The man who didn't need to push the detonator. He just needed to make sure someone else would. Daniel flew to Virginia under a new alias. He stood outside Bancroft's private estate, watching from a hilltop through high-powered binoculars. The property was massive, 3 stories, a helipad, 2 security gates, private guards. The kind of place built not to impress, but to deter. Daniel wasn't going to sneak in. He didn't need to. He just sent a note through a secure drop, delivered by courier. It said, I'm the reason you can't test sea glass. We need to talk. You have 24 hours before I go public with the footage. DS. He didn't expect a reply. But the next night, a car pulled up outside his hotel. 2 men stepped out, dressed like they belonged in an embassy. No words. Just a silent nod. Daniel followed. The ride was quiet. No phones. No tracking. Just tinted glass and soft jazz, like this was some twisted uber-black ride into the unknown. They pulled into an underground garage beneath a stone-faced federal building. Inside, Bancroft was waiting in a small, sterile conference room. The man looked 70. Clean cut. My size. No warmth. Mr. Shaw, he said. You've been busy. Daniel sat across from him. I'm not here for a handshake. No, Bancroft said calmly. You're here for a truth I'll never put in writing. Daniel leaned forward. You buried me. I didn't bury you, Bancroft replied. I moved a pawn. Ethan lit the match. Claire held the gas can. I simply watched the fire from a distance. You funded it. I funded the technology, not the mess that followed. Daniel's jaw clenched. You created the system, the funnel, the game, and you played it better than anyone. He almost sounded impressed. You think this ends with a confession? No, Bancroft said. It ends with a choice. Daniel stiffened. You keep digging, Bancroft said, and you'll uncover more bodies, more money, more names. But you'll also find one thing you can't bury: national security. This isn't a tech scam anymore. It's infrastructure. Our ships, our energy, our defense systems. Daniel was quiet. Bancroft continued. You go public with me, and you destabilize a sector of defense spending worth billions. You won't be exposing corruption. You'll be crippling command. I'm not interested in the politics, Daniel said. No, but they'll come for you anyway. Not to kill you this time, just to make you disappear the right way. Daniel stood slowly, then said, You're scared. Bancroft finally flinched. You ran a system so long, you forgot what it feels like when one man tells the truth loud enough that it cracks. He started walking out. Bancroft said nothing. But just before the door closed, he added, You're not the first, but you might be the last. Rachel met him back in Atlanta. He handed her a folder. Rowell. Bancroft. The final thread. She opened it, flipping through. This ends it. No, Daniel said. This lights it. Rachel's final documentary wasn't a film. It was a leak. A coordinated, time-synced, multi-platform data drop across 5 sites, 3 dark web servers, and 1 publicly visible chain. She called it the Architect Tapes. Inside were internal memos from Rowell, lobbying emails from Bancroft, payments tied to Claire and Ethan months before the accident, a list of prototype orders referencing unauthorized tech adaptation, Seaglass v2. The internet didn't just explode. It melted. Bancroft's name trended globally within hours. The Defense Department went into PR lockdown. Senators called emergency briefings. And Daniel? He turned off his phone, stepped into the woods behind the cabin, and let the chaos roar without him. He had nothing left to say. The story had gone bigger than him. Now it belonged to the people. Later that night, Conrad poured 2 bourbons. Daniel took one. I saw the leak, Conrad said. Had to be done. You're not afraid of the blowback? Daniel stared at the fire. No, why not? Daniel exhaled. Because for the first time, someone tried to kill me, and I lived long enough to kill the idea that gave them permission. They clinked glasses and drank, but across the country, in a high-rise office overlooking a DC skyline, someone else was watching. A young woman in a tactical black suit. Ear comms in, eyes on screen. She muted the video playing Daniel's leak and turned to a shadowed figure behind her. He's getting too close. The figure didn't speak, just stared. Then finally, make sure he never gets this far again. The woman nodded, walked out, and Daniel Shaw's name was added to a new list. This time, not as a target, but as a threat. Daniel knew what it felt like to be hunted, but this time was different. This wasn't rage. This was protocol. It started with his bank accounts freezing. Then his passport pinged with a security hold. His cabin, raided while he wasn't home. No cops. No break-in report. Just the smell of cologne that didn't belong to him. And the absence of the hard drives he kept under the floorboards. Burn notice. Someone had flipped the switch. He was no longer a victim. Now, he was a threat to national stability. The exact phrase used in the unmarked email he received at 4:13 a.m. Mr. Shaw, you have violated containment protocols. Cease all public disclosures immediately. Final warning. He didn't reply. He just forwarded it to Layla and Rachel and packed a go-bag. Rachel was the first to go dark. Her apartment? Cleared. Her phone? Dead. Her production company website redirected to a 404-page. Daniel checked every lead, every safe house. Nothing. Until one night, a burner phone pinged with a blocked call. He answered. A voice he recognized. Hers. They tried to flip me, Rachel whispered. They want me to say the leaks were faked. Are you safe? Temporary. I moved north. What do they want? To rewrite your legacy. Daniel paused. Then we give them a reason to fear it. He reached out to the one person he swore he'd never need again. Gavin. His brother had gone silent after transferring his shares and disappearing into suburban anonymity. But Daniel knew him too well. He still had leverage. An old safe deposit box they'd both used as teenagers to stash bootleg CDs and cash from poker games. Daniel left a note inside. They're coming for your last name. Time to earn it. Gavin showed up at 2 a.m. outside an abandoned warehouse in Wilmington. He looked rough, older, but this time honest. You want help or forgiveness? He asked. Daniel answered with a hard stare. Help. Gavin popped the trunk of his SUV. Inside, a server, labeled Carnova Archive. Backed up everything I didn't delete, Gavin said. It's yours. Names, timelines, code swaps. Daniel opened the case and plugged it into his laptop. A goldmine. Emails between Marcus Vale and a committee advisor discussing asset removal timelines. Internal notes from defense meetings titled Preemptive Silence Risk Matrix. And finally, a memo dated 3 weeks before Daniel's death, with one chilling line. Initiate contingency if show refuses partnership. There it was. The order. Daniel wasn't targeted because he was betrayed. He was betrayed because he said no. Layla called next. Her voice was tight, measured. They froze my badge access. You think they're watching you? No. I know they are. Daniel didn't say a word. She continued. I've got one more card to play, but it'll cost me everything. Then don't play it. You didn't come this far to stop now, she snapped. Neither did I. Then she hung up. 20 minutes later, Daniel got an email from her private encrypted line. Subject, Committee Ethics Hearing June 12th, closed session. Inside, a full witness list. Warrant J. Bancroft. 2 undersecretaries. 1 shadow account holder. And the unnamed black badge handler who recruited Daniel into the task force. The architects were being questioned. Quietly. Behind closed doors. And no one would ever hear it. Unless someone put a mic in the room. Daniel didn't trust mics. He trusted Ellie. She'd gone dark after her immunity deal, teaching at a state school under a different name. But she still owed him. And he knew how to collect without threatening her. He sent 1 flash drive. No note. Just a folder labeled, what they did to Charles. Her father. Ellie called the next day. You want access? No. I want you to get me in. That building's locked tighter than Fort Knox. You're a systems engineer, Daniel said. Figure it out. A pause. Then, if you get caught, I never knew you. You never did. June 12th. D.C. Federal Complex. Basement level 4. Daniel walked in wearing the ID of a junior assistant from the committee's IT division. Badge scanned clean, thanks to Ellie. Inside, he sat behind a wall partition with a hardwired uplink. No cameras. Just sound. He hit record. What he heard was worse than he expected. Bancroft. Mr. Shaw was flagged as a disruption to ongoing tech transition protocols. I advise containment. Undersecretary 1. The plan was never elimination. It was displacement. Black badge. We offered him protection. He declined. Bancroft. He published classified material. That removed protection. Chairperson. So, you sanctioned asset removal? Bancroft. I anticipated it. Daniel stopped the feed. That was all he needed. He uploaded the file to Rachel. Wherever she was, she'd know what to do. And she did. 2 days later, a third and final leak hit the net. This time not from a YouTube doc. From the Library of Congress Public Archive. Rachel had filed the full recording as unclassified ethical testimony on civilian threat designation policy. Within 30 minutes, it was copied to 48 mirror sites, trending worldwide. Even foreign intelligence agencies issued statements. And Daniel? He went to the place it all started. Lake Briar. The crash site. He sat on the dock. Same spot. Same hour. He looked out at the water. No rage. No grief. Just breath. Slow. Deep. Still. Behind him, footsteps. Conrad. You planning to disappear again? The old man asked. Daniel stood. Nah. I just wanted to see the place they tried to kill me. And Daniel looked down at the lake. They failed. At that moment, in Washington, D.C., Warrant J. Bancroft's resignation hit the wires. Carrall Strategies collapsed. Congress announced a new oversight division with Daniel Shaw's name listed as an external consultant. The committee that tried to erase him would now report to him. Indirectly, but permanently. And in a dark room, the woman in black reviewed the latest files on her screen. She typed 1 sentence into an internal memo. Target designation obsolete. Ghost has become architect. She had sinned. Then deleted Daniel's name from the list. Not because he was no longer dangerous, but because he'd already won. They offered him medals. Quiet ones. Nothing public. Just a handshake in a soundproof room. Just a nod from people who once signed the orders to bury him. Daniel declined every one. I didn't come back for your recognition, he said. What did you come back for? One official asked. Daniel looked the man in the eyes. To prove I existed. And he left the room. 6 months passed. The hearings became case studies. Rachel's trilogy of documentaries, After Death, The Machine, The Architects, became the most streamed investigative series on global platforms. A university added the Daniel Shaw case to their ethics curriculum. 2 senators resigned. One contractor went to federal prison. Claire disappeared from public life entirely. Some say she moved to South America. Others say she changed her name. Daniel never checked. He didn't need to. What he wanted wasn't vengeance anymore. It was weight. Something heavy enough to never be lifted off the truth again. He bought a small cabin in Montana. No tech. No screens. Just a dog named Kite, a fire that never needed kindling, and a shed where he wrote letters he never sent. Sometimes, kids would visit on field trips and point at the trail marker named after him, the Shaw Line, trail of the unburied truth. He never introduced himself, just nodded from the porch. And sometimes, when the air was quiet and the world forgot how loud betrayal could be, he'd look up at the trees and whisper one name, Dad, because in the end, that's who he did it for. Not for revenge, not for court, not even for justice. For the name, for legacy, for truth. One night, Rachel came to visit. They sat on the porch in silence for 10 minutes before she finally spoke. They offered me a studio deal. Take it, Daniel said. I want to make one more thing. No more stories to tell, he said, sipping tea. She pulled a page from her jacket, laid it on the table. It was a children's book outline. The Man Who Came Back. Daniel read it in silence. His eyes didn't well up. They didn't need to. All he said was, "Don't make him sound like a hero." Rachel smiled. "I won't. I'll make him sound real." The last file Daniel ever touched was sealed in a thumb drive and placed inside a safety deposit box in Charleston. It included a copy of the sea glass blueprints, signed by both him and his father, the final decrypted version of Bancroft's memo, a short voice recording of Daniel saying only one sentence, "They tried to write my ending, but I built my own." Years later, a young boy asked his teacher, "Did Daniel Shaw ever come back to technology?" The teacher smiled and said, "No, he didn't need to. He already gave the world everything it tried to steal from him." And in a quiet mountain cabin, Daniel Shaw stood by the window, watching the sunrise burn away the last shadows of a life once stolen. The fire was out, but the warmth remained, because some names don't get erased. Some names get carved, and Daniel's was carved into history. She called him broken, but he built something unbreakable. If you felt this story, if you saw the truth in every betrayal, every twist, every win, like it, share it. Let the world hear what they tried to silence. The toast lives on, and so does Daniel Shaw.